Quick, what is the most influential video game genre of all time? Time's up. I'd wager most of you just answered either shooters, platformers, or RPGs. This trio of genres has defined what video games are for many people. However, what many don't realize is that there's been a genre pulling the strings behind the scenes, a hidden boss in the gaming industry, ruling in shadow while no one notices its strength. Believe it or not, games about caves and mining have been dictating trends in the gaming landscape for the past 20 years. No, hear me out, let me explain. The year is 2004. Music looked like this, movies looked like this, and gaming looked like this.
Drive, throw stuff, switch, Mario Kart Double Dash.
Consoles were on the rise in the consumer market, while PC gaming was achieving a mere fraction of its competitors' success. But why was that? After all, a ton of really influential and important PC games came out this year. World of Warcraft and Half-Life 2, two of the biggest computer games ever made, came out in 2004. So why were the PS2 and GameCube the focus of the gaming community? Well, there are a number of reasons for this, all too big for discussion here, but the largest was convenience. Steam hadn't been opened for third-party developers yet, so it was a major hassle to play games on a computer when you had no idea where the games actually came from. Long story short, PC gaming wasn't nearly as prevalent in 2004, but 3 little games were going to come along in the next 5 years and change all of that forever, rewriting the history of video games into what we know it as today. On December 20th, 2004, Cave Story would be released by head developer Daisuke Pixel Amaya. It's been widely regarded as the first majorly successful indie game, being a pet project Amaya worked on in his free time over the course of 5 years. It was released to renowned critical acclaim, astounding people with its retro aesthetic, engaging story, and most of all, its gameplay. Taking place in an underground dystopian landscape, Amaya would utilize the setting of a cave to great effect in allowing his game to stand out amongst more contemporary games in the genre. Many developers and historians have credited Cave Story as reviving Metroidvanias. However, more broadly, Cave Story opened the doors for many other indie developers to have their games be considered as relevant. One of which being 2006's Dwarf Fortress. Yet another indie game made as a passion project, Dwarf Fortress was initially released by a 2-man group, with its nearly 4-year development surviving entirely on donations. Its goal was to create as complex and accurate of a civilization simulation as possible, utilizing dwarves as the primary population. It was critical for new players to start their run by digging into the side of a mountain and extracting the resources of its caves, using the stones and minerals of the earth to fortify the aptly named Dwarf Fortress. The development of this project would continue for years to come, progressively gaining a larger and larger player base. And one of those players would be a young developer by the name of Marcus Persson. In 2009, Persson would take specific mechanics like mining, caving, and building that were featured in Dwarf Fortress and turn them into their own game, called Ruby Dung. And Ruby Dung would later be renamed to Minecraft. This game, which needs no introduction, would eventually go on to be the best-selling game of all time, and introduced millions of people to the concept of PC gaming. These 3 games each took steps towards revolutionizing indie game development, as well as PC gaming as a whole. And yet, they all have one thing in common. They all focus primarily on caves, the underground, or mining. But why is that? What makes the dark, terrifying underbelly of Earth so engaging and satisfying to explore? How do you make the tedious and stressful nature of mining into something that's fun? Well, beneath the layers of boredom, danger, and fear that permeate mining in our real world, game developers have found ways to make the monotony of hitting rocks into something that can grip a player for hours. Let's look below the surface and find out what diamonds lie beneath all this rock and stone. One of the most important aspects of mining that makes it satisfying is the process behind it. How do you go about getting those minerals out of the ground? For many games, the process behind mining is the selling point behind the gameplay as a whole. In games like Splunky or Deep Rock Galactic, the difficulty and depth offered by the game is found primarily through the environment. The procedural generation these games have challenges the player to overcome interesting and unique situations every time they play the game. This makes the process of mining the focus in these games, Of course, actually mining the resources in either of these games is as easy as holding down a button for a few seconds, but the fun is found in the way in which you are able to reach a given mineral or take down an enemy standing in your way. If you're running through a mining expedition in DRG and you see Morkite on the ceiling, your brain immediately says, okay, that's my goal, how do I get there? The game, without explicitly saying anything, has eased the player into solving a puzzle. How do I get from point A to point B? And because Deep Rock Galactic is a masterclass in game design, the answer to this question will vary wildly depending on what class you've chosen, what biome you're in, what weapons you have selected, and a bunch of other factors that make the process of mining feel unique every single time. But getting the environment right is just one side of the process coin. The other side of the coin is found in the tools you mine with and how you use them. In a game like Mindustry, the process of mining is accomplished by machines and technology, with automated drills being used to extract minerals into conveyors and transport them back to your base. Meanwhile, a game like Minecraft forces the player to use basic primitive tools for basically all of the mining in the game, unless you want to be that one guy on the server who insists on TNT duping a gigantic hole to bedrock level, in which case, I'm too scared to stop you, so these two approaches, machines and brute force, give the player different perceptions of their power over the environment. In Mindustry, the game sets the player as superior to the environment. On the other hand, Minecraft forces the player to contend with the environment, to battle with it. When you spawn in, you can't break even a single piece of stone without aging 17 years, which makes the player feel like the environment is a challenge that they have to overcome. Through the tools that Minecraft provides, the player feels inferior to the environment, at least when they start out. You see, as a player in Minecraft continues throughout their journey, they begin to develop a greater control over their environment, largely through the upgrades. Upgrades are an important way to make a player feel like the process of mining is changing and evolving over time. When a player upgrades their tool from a stone pickaxe to an iron pickaxe, the immediate question that enters a player's mind is how much better am I now than I was before? Providing a satisfying answer to this question, while keeping the game a challenge, is an excellent way to keep mining engaging over a long period of time. But if we dig just a little bit deeper, we arrive at the next layer to consider when one is mining in a video game: the atmosphere. Caves in real life are some of the most terrifying and mysterious locations on Earth. Hundreds of people throughout history have written legends, myths, and fairy tales regarding these deep, dark depressions in the Earth. The mystique that caves hold is something that video games often seek to capture, as it allows for the player to feel even more immersed in the environment the game is presenting. This focus on atmosphere is something that the beta era of Minecraft excelled in. The darker lighting and slower pace that these older versions have elicits more unease out of the player when they're forced to venture into these forbidden landscapes. Not to mention, the lack of potions, shield, and sprinting means that the player wasn't nearly as safe in the caves, which led to them being much more foreboding than the contemporary caves of the game today. And of course, you can't talk about Minecraft's atmospheric caverns without mentioning that familiar yet eerie cave ambience. Games like Don't Starve, Core Keeper, and the aforementioned Cave Story also all heavily rely on using their atmosphere to immerse the player into their respective underground environments. Core Keeper in particular is a game that has a unique struggle compared to most. The whole game takes place underground, so the challenge the developers have to contend with is how to differentiate the player's home from the rest of the world when it's all in the darkness of the cave. The way this is accomplished is by associating the lighting and buildings the player creates with the warmer colors, and the outside untouched environment with cooler colors. This means that the act of mining visually feels like the player is expanding the coziness of their home and imprinting safety onto the world, which is a subtle way to positively reinforce the gameplay. Though it often goes overlooked, atmosphere is one of the primary ways to engage a player with a normally tedious or boring task. Speaking personally, I've spent hours on a single Deep Rock mission before, just mining and exploring and killing the occasional wave of bugs. The look and feel of it all was enough to carry my engagement and make me feel like I was accomplishing something. However, at the end of the day, every mining expedition has to come to its inevitable conclusion. When you crawl back to the surface, all that you're left with is the loot, the gems and minerals you gathered while exploring the underbelly of Earth. For many, what makes mining satisfying is the rewards. In real life, caves are one of nature's catch-22s. On one hand, they're some of the most dangerous places in existence, a place where one single mistake can cause a cave-in that will bury you and your entire crew alive. But on the other hand, it's within that danger that some of Earth's most valuable resources reside. resources so valuable that they've forced humanity to brave the underground nightmare in pursuit of its treasure. This conundrum is what makes mining such a natural fit for video games. It's a challenging situation with a lot of mystery attached to it, but the prospect of rewards makes it just worth it enough to search for the Earth's legendary fruits. Many games forego the process of mining in the atmosphere of caves to focus on the rewards. A game that does this incredibly well, maybe even the best, is Terraria. Terraria's biggest strength is making the player feel like they're constantly progressing. The game is designed in such a way where, ideally, a player's journey should never feel stagnant. This is primarily accomplished through two focuses. The first is giving the player a variety of goals, and the second is constantly rewarding the player with new stuff to do. The way mining is designed in Terraria complements both of these focuses very well. For the former, many of the systems the game establishes for the player, such as upgrading your gear, rely on the player venturing underground in order to achieve them. For the latter, the player will almost constantly be presented with new, interesting, and useful items while underground, just rewards for attempting to venture beyond their home. The endless amount of treasure present in Terraria's caves makes exploring them feel rewarding and satisfying. This means that Terraria always gives the player a reason to mine, and also gives them continued incentives to stay mining. Incredibly simple, yet efficient game design. Other games also have similar systems, though rarely implemented as well or as thoroughly. Stardew Valley is one such game, having a mining system that the player is always encouraged to interact with out of necessity. However, there's not that much depth in its actual execution. The rewards are nice and well integrated with the game's sense of progression, but the process itself leaves a lot to be desired, and there aren't nearly as many extra unique rewards to be found as there are in Terraria or even Minecraft for that matter. That said, it does make sense given how Stardew Valley's mining system is less integral to the game overall than some of these other games. Necesse, Forager, and Outpath also implement a similar focus on the rewards, rather than the process or atmosphere. While Necesse is sometimes called the top-down Terraria by both fans and critics alike, it lacks variety in its underground system that its big brother has. Forager forgoes the typical cave system altogether, and instead has all the minerals and gems simply appear above the ground. An interesting approach that streamlines the mining process, but at the expense of any sort of exploration or adventure. Outpath has easily the worst Terraria-like mining system of the three. It has both the caves of Necesse and the appearing resources of Forager. However, because the resources already appear above the ground anyways, it makes the caves you can access almost completely obsolete. There's also no difference in the rewards that could be found underground versus above ground, which makes the caves even more pointless. So there's no exploration or satisfaction in gathering the rewards from mining, but I suppose it's hard to contend with the absolute best example. In researching various mining systems for this video, I found that nearly all of them revolve around an idea I'm going to call incremental encouragement. It's the concept of keeping the player engaged by giving them little rewards along the course of their journey. It's the same principle that makes EXP and level up so prominent in a lot of games. Giving the player a steady sense of growth is vital to maintaining constant attention and giving incentives for the player to finish their journey. If you can quantify the time and effort a player has put in, allowing them to see how deep in they are, you're more likely to keep them playing. And out of all of the ways games have accomplished this sense of incremental encouragement, mining and caving are the two that I personally have found most compelling. Of course, there are a multitude of games that have an underdeveloped mining system or bland, unappealing caves to explore. But when the idea is executed well, it's a feeling that's not matched by any other. A good mining system is one that's often filled with little bursts of positive feedback. Though you may venture into a cave looking for diamonds, on the way there you might slowly amass a small collection of iron, gold, and other useful treasure. Every little discovery is a small hit of dopamine for the player, keeping them invested throughout their quest to find diamonds. That way, when you finally stumble upon the elusive gem, it feels like the end of a long journey, and a very fruitful one at that. You've set a natural goal for yourself, and achieved it, and just maybe the extra treasures you found are incentive enough to keep you mining, even after the journey has already concluded, in hopes of finding even more treasure to take back home. This carrot-on-a-stick design philosophy is what has led to people sinking days upon days of their time into many of the games I've discussed today. Mining in video games often results in players gambling away their own time, saying that they just need to mine one more rock, explore one more branch, do one more mission, and then they can finally stop. It's the ongoing loop that's endlessly engrossing, and for me at least, incredibly relaxing to get lost in for hours at a time. Even the challenges faced in these caves can feel like little adventures in their own right, such as building a temporary shelter to hide from the monsters in Minecraft when there's nowhere else to go, or getting past a particularly tough wave of glyphids on Hox's 4. Mining is a feature that often goes underutilized in the games it's featured in. A simple simulation where you hold left click at a bunch of rubble until you get the thing that you want. But a well-executed mining system can impart some of the most satisfying feelings of catharsis video games can possibly achieve. It's just up to the player to sift through all the rock and stone and find those diamonds in the rough.